I thought I'd take a little bit of digression here to discuss some concerns raised by our church friends about separation of families. Many of the criticisms raised in recent days are not fair, not logical, and some are contrary to plain law. First, illegal entry into the United States is a crime. It should be, it must be, if you're going to have a legal system and have any limits whatsoever. Persons who violate the law of our nation are subject to prosecution. If you violate the law, you subject yourself to prosecution. And I would cite you to the Apostle Paul and his clear and wise command in Romans 13 to obey the laws of the government, because God has ordained the government for his purposes. Orderly and lawful processes are good in themselves. Consistent, fair application of law is in itself a good and moral thing, and that protects the weak. It protects the law.
First of all, he's misinterpreting that text. Paul actually was arrested by the government because Christians challenged the government. That's one of the reasons Paul ends up getting killed. So that's the first thing. Second of all, the Bible is clear from the Old Testament to the New Testament that one of God's primary concerns is that we care for the stranger, that we do not rob children of their rights and mothers of their children, that we welcome the stranger and make sure that the stranger, the immigrant, the undocumented person is treated like a brother or sister. You cannot find anywhere where Jesus or the prophets would say anything like what Sessions said. Now, he is operating from a playbook. That's the same kind of heresy that was used to support the genocide of Native Americans. It's the same kind of biblical heresy that was used to support slavery and used to support Jim Crow. It's the law. And that's why movements broke it. As remember Dr. King said, any law that's against God's law and against the law of justice, we have a responsibility to challenge that law.
Read the headlines. You know you've taken hits on the Romans 13 quote. First of all, I want to get your reaction to that, I guess, overall. But there is this balance between enforcing the law, which is a biblical principle, and the biblical principle of compassion. And I think we all struggle, evangelicals, and especially in government, I would think there's a struggle there. But I'd be curious as to the backlash that you've received about this. Give me your thoughts.
Yeah, well, a lot of people have pushed back on that. I don't think that was an extreme position that I took, and I directed it not to say that religion requires these laws on immigration. I just simply said to my Christian friends, you know, the United States has laws, and I believe Paul was clear in Romans that we should try to follow the laws of the government of which we are a part. Mm-hmm. So that was basically my point. And let me say one more thing. Mm-hmm. I believe strongly that it is moral and decent and just for a nation to have a lawful system of immigration. I'm not aware of a single nation in the world that doesn't have some sort of rules about who can enter and who cannot enter. I believe they're biblical support for that too. But fundamentally, that's what I think is at stake. And if you have rules of immigration, don't they have to be enforced? Isn't it almost wrong or immoral or unjustified to say you can come unlawfully, but you can't? You file, you wait your turn, you make your application to enter lawfully, somebody else just enters the country unlawfully? I think that's moral. I think that's just to say the law should apply and you should make your application, which we are very generous about. Mm-hmm. And David, one more thing. We admit 1.1 million people every year to lawful permanent residence in the United States. Mm-hmm. We have another, I think 600,000 people that come to take jobs. Hundreds of thousands of students are here right now educating in the United States. We are not a closed society. But if you have, it cannot be an open border society. 150 million people said they'd like to come to the United States if they could. Mm-hmm. And if they got here, they'd want to bring their cousins and their mamas and daddies and another 150 million. The country can't absorb that. It has it's perfectly legitimate for it to set standards of admission I just think strongly that people are muddling these issues. And so if you have a limit on your immigration, even though we're generous, we have certain limits, then those limits should be sustained.
But I will give Sessions this. That is what Romans 13:1 says, okay? You got to have laws. But if he just read a little bit further into Romans 13:10, it says, love your neighbor as yourself. Love does no harm to a neighbor. Therefore, love is the fulfillment of the law. But I'm not surprised.